The Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey presents the Forum on the Future of NPO Funding. This program was recorded October 13, 2010 in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. In this video, a panel discussion with funders about their philanthropic outreach. Joining us for the panel are Douglas Schoenberger of Verizon, Lois Greco of Wachovia, and Sydney Hargrove from the Community Foundation of Southern New Jersey. Moderating the program is Michael Willman of WMSH Marketing Communications.
Talk about magic wands. I don't know what would be the response to a magic wand question to our three panelists, but we're going to take them in this order. You heard Chris refer to the impact of Bell Labs. Our first of our panelists, actually, I'm not sure that it was the very beginning of his professional career, but the genesis of the professional career that I know about for Doug started at Bell Labs. He's one of those people with a master's degree in engineering, so I think that means he's smart. I have no idea what it really means because engineers do stuff, it's color-coded and it's numbered, and you have to be logical and you have to know stuff, and certainly beyond any realm I ever wanted to deal in. But what you need to know is that he's the Vice President for Corporate Responsibility and Public Policy for Verizon, New Jersey. He's also responsible for the company's philanthropic activities in New Jersey. Spent a whole lot of time working for AT&T, doing important stuff in terms of international issues for AT&T in Washington and all other kinds of public policy stuff. So has a distinguished background on that side of the house, in addition to being an engineer and understanding that other stuff. And in New Jersey, he sits on the board of Leadership New Jersey. He sits on the board of Einstein's Alley. So all the kinds of things that Chris was referencing in terms of innovation, creativity, the kinds of things that might provide platforms for New Jersey to jump off in terms of shaping its destiny. Those are the kinds of things that Doug deals with every day. So we're delighted to have him. So our first panelist, Doug Schoenberger from Verizon.
Thank you very much for those kind words. I want to take just a few minutes today and tell you two different things. I want to break down my time into two sections. First is going to be perspectives from a corporate foundation guy. So that's me. And the second part's going to be confessions of a corporate foundation guy. And that's also me as well. Verizon, New Jersey, we have 17,000 people in the state. Corporate responsibility is a big deal. We're a pretty big corporate citizen, and it's part of our culture to be a good one. So my job is to facilitate that in the state, and it's a lot of fun. We do that in a couple different ways. We do it through philanthropy, of course. We also do it through employee volunteerism. So let me start with the philanthropy part and tell you a little bit about my life on that side. So I'm with Verizon, New Jersey. I'm not with the Verizon Foundation. The foundation itself is headquartered in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, but I have the privilege of getting funds allocated to me from the foundation that I get to allocate to nonprofits in the state. And we do that on a calendar year basis. And I have a pretty broad brush on what I can do with that money. But there's a couple of big boxes that I have to hit, and hit pretty heavy on a yearly basis. The first one is education and literacy. Again, that box in and of itself is defined fairly broadly. The biggest part of that box for us is our Thinkfinity program, www.thinkfinity.org. Please go there if you haven't. It is content that's created and approved by leading education and literacy organizations. It's K through 12, lesson plans, interactive guides, wealth of information, discipline-specific websites. It's Verizon Foundation funded completely. I have to say, thank you. I have to say free like 3 times when I talk about Thinkfinity, because I've had teachers come up to me and say, I got on Thinkfinity, but it was so good, there was no way that could be free. I was getting charged somehow when I logged off. It's free. It's completely free, and we encourage you to go there. It's high quality material. That's the biggest part of our education and literacy basket that I have to hit as well. Version 2.0 of that is out as of a couple weeks ago, a little more community focused. Please take a look at that as well. Before I forget, if you would take a corporate responsibility book on the way out, that would be great too. That's going to summarize what Verizon does as a company, corporate responsibility writ large. So I brought some of those for us as well. So education and literacy is the first part of that. Again, we do technology literacy, financial, health, Again, broadly defined. Our Check into Literacy program, some of you may be familiar with. On the bottom of your Verizon bills, there's a box. If you check that, an extra $1 goes into a fund that we get to administer in the state, and we do that via an RFP process, and we give out literacy grants. And this year we had $250,000, and through the RFP process gave out about 50 grants to literacy organizations around the state. Again, another way to promote literacy in the state using your money, actually, and we are the grateful administrators of that program as well. So check into literacy. Look for that box on the bottom of your Verizon bill. Please check that. So that's education and literacy very briefly. The other box that I need to hit pretty heavy is healthcare and safety. Again, that aspect is pretty broadly defined, but the overall goal is to increase safety, advance health care, and improve quality of life for individuals and families in every community. The biggest part of that box for Verizon Foundation is domestic violence awareness and prevention. We do a lot of work in that space. I think we're going to do more work in that space. We are just wrapping up an RFP on domestic violence and just making those grants pretty much as we speak. That's an epidemic, and you all know that. But 70,000 domestic violence offenses last year in New Jersey. And those are the ones that are just reported. So we're spending much time on that as well. But also in that space, we do healthcare technology grants. Healthcare is a big deal for Verizon. We're a very big employer. We pay a lot of healthcare. We're self-insured. $4 billion a year we spend that. But if you ask our chairman what's the single most important issue in healthcare, it's not the classic Washington policy debates of single payer, etc. It's getting IT into healthcare, information technology into healthcare. He tells a great story. Why is it when he calls up LL Bean every holiday season, they know exactly what he ordered last year, the color of the sweater, the size, what he ordered 2 years ago, what he might like this year. But every time you go into your doctor's office, they hand you a clipboard. That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. A little closer to home, I have kidney stones. When I first got them, I was about to get diagnosed. He's going to give me a treatment for that. I just happened to be walking out of my doctor's office and told him that I had kidney stones. He was treating me for high blood pressure. His head snaps around and he says, "You had kidney stones?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "What I just prescribed for you actually gives you kidney stones." I said, "I wonder if there's something else that we could try for my high blood pressure." Okay? What a perfect spot for IT, right? So IT and technology components of all of our grants are very important as we evaluate grants. A technology component is key to that as well. So very briefly, let me also tell you about Hopeline. As we go back to domestic violence, Verizon Wireless has a really neat program where cell phones are donated. And you might have seen Hopeline boxes, I hope you have, somewhere in a building or your building where cellular phones are donated back. We take those phones, we do a couple different things with them. Sometimes we recycle them, sometimes we refurbish them and sell them. And the funds that are generated for that go to domestic violence causes in the state and around the country. So that's the Hopeline program as well. $1.6 million in cash grants last year, again in the domestic violence space as well. So that's kind of my world. I have a pretty broad brush, but I have a couple of boxes that I have to hit pretty heavily. Another space in the safety side is internet safety. We do a lot on internet safety, and we do that for seniors and we do that for kids. The messages are very different, although the underpinnings are the same. The internet is a great place to be. And we want to encourage people to use the broadband network that we have in New Jersey. We have, you could argue a little bit, but we have the best broadband network in the country. Part of that is because we're all on top of each other. It's a little easier to roll out a broadband network. But part of my job is to get people to use it more. So in the internet safety space, as we talk to seniors, we encourage them, you got to get out on the internet. It's a great place. You're going to love it. My mother was hooked when she realized she could nag me electronically. It's a wonderful place, but you have to be careful. Okay, you probably didn't win that laptop. You're probably not going to get $8 million by helping that Nigerian prince. You just need to be aware that there's some bad things out there, but we really encourage the seniors to get out there. The kids program is very different. It's a scared straight program, to be quite honest. It's, you know what, you're not bulletproof. There's a lot of people out there doing bad things on the internet. We have hired an outside consultant to do programs for us, and he lays it down pretty straight that everything you do is public and permanent on the internet. Want you to be there, like they're not going to be, right? But want you to be there, but you got to be careful. So internet safety is another big piece of what we do on the philanthropy side. Again, really quickly, volunteerism at Verizon is very, very big. We have a series of very generous programs to encourage volunteerism. I can't do micro grants, okay? I can't do PTAs, elementary schools. If you live in Hopewell Borough, you got a shot, but I really can't do those. So one way we get to that is through our volunteer program, where we have very passionate volunteers who are out in the community doing exactly what they want. We have matching incentive programs up to $5,000 for educational grants, $1,000 for other. Volunteer incentive program. At Verizon, if you give 50 hours of your time, we'll give that organization $750. Which is a very, very popular program. We also have team programs where we underwrite teams of people who are out doing volunteer efforts. So volunteerism is also the second part of our overall corporate responsibility side. So real quickly, I want to move to the environment. We are very much into green. We have just appointed a corporate sustainability officer. We have a CSO at Verizon. We do a bunch of stuff on the green side. Our Basking Ridge location, where Chris is from, award-winning for maintaining the wetlands there. We've put hybrid trucks and are putting hybrid trucks in our fleet. We are very aggressive about a no idling policy for our technicians in their trucks to turn that off. 100 million bills are delivered electronically by Verizon, so the savings there are amazing. So again, really quickly, the environment is certainly part of being a good corporate citizen. We have a very big corporate citizen footprint. We want to keep that as green as we can. Okay, let me move on real quickly to confessions. Pretty new to this, a couple years on the corporate responsibility side. It's been really something. One of the best things about this job is I get to meet and sit with a lot of really passionate people who are really into what they are doing. That is an energy source. That really is. So keep that up. One of my confessions is, and my encouragements to you, is you need to match your passion with my process, okay? I work in a huge company, right? We are a little bureaucratic at times, okay? Your passion and my process sometimes move at different rates. So sometimes there's some patience required on our end. We're not perfect to begin with, but it's not that we've forgotten you. It's just that we've got some things we got to go through. So there's a patience level I've seen that sometimes is required. To be honest, I'll be amazed at the pleases and thank yous that we don't get. Just be careful of that stuff. It kind of counts. You know, corporate responsibility, people are people too, it turns out. And sometimes that sense of entitlement pops up as well. That, well, Verizon's always funded us, I assume you're gonna. Well, it's a pretty competitive space out there, and we get a lot of grants in, and you know, there probably should be nothing taken for granted. Also, beware the line of what the foundation does and what our business does. We have a very serious quid pro quo line, and we keep those things very separate, and that's important to us as well. Some of the quotes I've heard in my couple years here that have snapped my head around a little bit. Quote, "I won't bother with a grant for that amount of money." Okay, let me quantify it for you. My average grant is like Dodge's micro grants, which makes me feel a little funny, but my average grant is about 10, but my median is much lower. So a typical grant is 6, 5, 6, 7. We have a peanut butter approach to how we do philanthropy. I like Chris's words of it's a venture capital approach. That's probably another good way to put it. But we try to make a lot of people at least a little happy, generally. So that's because we're everywhere in the state, and that's part of our charter. So you need to understand that when you come to me, that I'm not going to make you super rich, but we really want to participate for programs that match our funding criteria. Quote, "Oh my, we're going to need much more than that." I think you probably are going to need much more than that. Next year, you might need even more than that. We need to find the dollar behind the dime. if I had $1, you'd have a shot at it, but I'm kind of in the dime space. So you just understand my world a little bit. On the other hand, and this is I'm sure where all you are, there's been some there's very good things I've heard too. When we haven't been able to grant people, I really appreciate you looking at what we have. I don't see the fit either. Maybe we'll be back next year. Now, what do you think runs through my head when I see them come back next year? It's like, wow, they were really gracious last year. Let's make sure we really take a look at that. We're kind of people too. I really appreciate your grant. Thanks very much. That goes a long way. Draw your own line between follow-up and nagging. There is a line. You need to make your decision on where that is. And sometimes a nag is required. I will completely confess that both at home and at work, sometimes a nag is required. We are working very, very hard, and this is probably not the best news, to get away from the galas and the golf. I love to golf. I can eat a lot of chicken, but we are working really, really hard to get to the programmatic side, which is what our foundation is about. It's programs, it's demonstrable results that we can count and we can show. We're a company, right? We count everything we possibly can, and that includes results out of grants. So I know that's not always good news for foundations who make a lot of unearmarked money out of these events. Unfortunately, it butts up a little bit with our principle of we're looking for targeted programs that have results. I am sensitive to that need, but and we're walking that fine line. And then I'll stop with finally, the publicity part of this is important to us. So if we work with our grantees, if you can put something up on a website, if you can do a press release, maybe you have a Facebook page, that really, really counts. I give my team a quantifiable number every year for what we call media hits. Now, counting media hits in 2010 is a very interesting discussion on what a media hit is. But the point is for my team that, we need to ask more for you all as we give out grants to do what you can to give us some publicity. And then also tell us when you do it, let us know so we can be aware of it. And that stuff counts for next year. It absolutely does. Especially in an RFP space where you're going mano a mano with other grants. You know what? They gave us a nice website, and the press release got picked up in 2 of the locals in South Jersey. That stuff turns out to be important. So if you can help us, that would be great on the publicity side, and keep that in mind as well. So those are a few of my confessions. We are thrilled to be part of it. We look forward to being more involved even down here in South Jersey, and I appreciate your time very, very much.
Two things. I think there was a object lesson. If you listen to Chris and what he said about storytelling, and if you look at what Doug did, taking one of the largest corporate faces in New Jersey, and now you're going to go home and you know that he has kidney stone disease, and you know that he has high blood pressure, and you know that he makes micro loans, or grants, not loans, micro grants. So his ability to do the whole narrative thing, which people started to understand once people said, oh, Sarah Palin, she can field dress a moose. Okay, that's when people started to use the word narrative, but people in marketing were using it for a long time. But what he did was put a very friendly, open, down-to-earth face on a company that, for all intents and purposes, is just another big utility, and we hate them, right? So now, who can hate a guy with kidney stones,
Yeah, exactly.
I have kidney stones, so I was like, hey, let's go no, we can't have a cup of coffee because that's not good for kidney stones. The other thing is, let us take a lesson from what he said, which is that people in his business are people too, and they like to be thanked. So this is going to seem a little artificial to you, but we're going to do it because I'm going to guarantee it will make South Jersey, which is not the first region on Doug's list, more memorable. So I'm going to ask you to do something. Would you all stand up? And what I want you to do on the count of 3 is to applaud, so that when Doug goes home into that nagging environment that he was referring to, he will be able to say to his family, you know what? I went to South Jersey this morning. I was on this panel. Would you believe it? When I was done talking, the whole room got up and gave me a standing ovation.
They won't believe it.
Now, if he comes back next year and says sincerity counts, then we're going to have to work, harder on that. But you looked pretty sincere when you did that. Next person on our panel is Lois Greco. I've known Lois the longest of the folks on this panel. She is coming up on, I believe, her 10th year, right, as the person who is sort of the face of the Wachovia Regional Foundation.
That is correct.
Now, I don't know whether it's going to become the Wells Fargo Regional Foundation.
In January 1st, yeah.
So stop thinking the blue and green and start thinking orange and mustard.
Red and gold.
Red and gold. Hey, orange and whatever. Lois is the Senior Vice President of Wachovia. She is the Evaluation Officer for the Foundation and for the CDC, which stands for Community Development. Okay. She has other responsibilities, which include being the State Coordinator for Pennsylvania and Delaware for Reading First. Reading First, sorry. So, and she has been, certainly in my experience, the face of Wachovia's philanthropy in this region for, a decade, which meant that, she was plucked out of junior high school to do this. So, Lois, come on.
Still morning, right? Good morning. I'm going to make sure, can you hear me back there and can you hear me over there? Excellent. Well, I am really grateful to be here today. I live in South Jersey, so I'm always thrilled to share the joy of living in South Jersey and the great things of South Jersey with those of you from North Jersey. It was great to see that people actually came. They can venture across 195 down here. I work for actually the Wachovia Regional Foundation. So I'm the face of the Wachovia Regional Foundation, which is different than the Wachovia Foundation, which is now the Wells Fargo Foundation. But they're my cousin. So I can speak about them and plan to help share their story here today. But I'm most intimate about our story at the Wachovia Regional Foundation. A little bit about my background. I'm a recovering lender. I specialized in lending to nonprofit organizations. I also am a recovering director of development for Goodwill Industries of Eastern North Carolina. And then I have the wonderful privilege of now being able to give money away. And it's all money. Whether you're lending it, asking for it, or giving it, all the skill sets are the same. The other thing I also confess usually up front is that my husband is a Methodist minister. So my income really relies on giving as well, and can really appreciate what that means in mission. And I know what this economy means to the families that live in both southern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey, because our phone rings constantly about people who need diapers, about people who need formula, who need food. And really the work that this sector does is tremendous. And so I thank you for your work that you do. To give you a little bit, as Michael stole our thunder a little bit, yes, Wachovia, you might have heard, is now going to become Wells Fargo in this region. And I cover 3 states, so they're going at different times. So forgive me, I will say by April of next year, everybody in this region, whether it's Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Delaware, which is my region, will be Wells Fargo. The Wells Fargo, the Wachovia Regional Foundation, our name change is on January 1st to the Wells Fargo Regional Foundation. One of the things I want to share with you is around, from a corporate foundation perspective, and Doug was alluding to it today. Not only are we people, but corporations are sort of people, if you think about them. And they're running a business. So when a corporation is being philanthropic, they're thinking about their business. And that's normal and natural, and you would want that, I think. You want that as a shareholder in a company, you want them always to be thinking about their business. And while absolutely there are legal tendencies and that everybody's following, think about your business case. What is the reason that a foundation should give money to you, whether it's a private foundation or a corporate foundation? But for a corporate foundation, is there an alignment? Don't make it up. We are people. We have some level of common sense. But if there's a really vested reason why we should be thinking about you, that's the story that you should be presenting. For a banking institution, a financial services sector, community development and our neighborhoods are very important to us. So it's very compelling to us around neighborhood stabilization. Right now would be our story. My particular foundation, which is a private foundation, is very focused on creating comprehensive neighborhood revitalization plans in low-income communities in eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Manny is one of our grantees. Miosha is one of our grantees. Asbury Park is one of our grantees. I mean, I was thrilled to see them here. But we really are working with our mission to help those neighborhoods become stronger, revitalized neighborhoods. And we're leading with mission, but by golly, it brands really well for the corporation. So again, thinking around that, I would say increasingly corporations are becoming more strategic in their philanthropy. And they're trying to think about that storyline that they need to be telling. So I heard like Verizon, no surprise to me, they're in technology, no surprise to me that they're around internet, broadband stuff, that makes perfect sense for them. And as they're doing that, they're also thinking about the quantifiable story that they can tell. I'm an evaluation officer, and I'm hoping my grantees will also say authentically yes. Evaluation really is about learning, and we're not the government at all. We're not using it as an audit. What I'm really leading with is saying, what matters to you programmatically? That's what you should be using evaluation to do, to be able to demonstrate, are you doing it? Are you not doing it? If you're not doing it, nobody wants anybody to waste your resources, so you should be able to learn from that and say, how can we do it better? So really, evaluation is a tool for you. It's not a tool for the foundation. It's not a tool for the government, but it really should be designed together to learn. And not only to learn, but then for you to be able to tell your story much more compelling, much more, again, quantifiably about impacts. How are you really making a difference in whatever it is you're trying to do? And if you're not, then how are you going to do it better? And how can we help you do that? The other thing I do, because I always forget this hat, I am also part of the Wachovia Regional Community Development Corporation. And there we are providing program-related investments, which Chris alluded to. Somebody in here had asked the question about using your endowment or your grant-making resources for loans. And absolutely, we are doing that at the Wachovia Regional CDC in the form of program-related investments to help seed projects that are in the neighborhoods that we are funding in. But I say that because it is definitely a trend on the rise throughout the company, throughout the country. There's an organization called PRI Makers, which are foundations that are really trying to learn how to do this. It is new and emerging. Ford Foundation may have started it in the 80s or whenever the heck they started it, but it didn't get popular in the philanthropy until the Great Recession is when it really started, because foundations said, we really still want to make a difference. Our resources really have shrunk. And I'm not kidding you when I say foundations, endowments, on average, 35% declines. That's not an unusual story. But yet foundations, their boards and their staff are really invested in their missions. So they don't want to, they know the needs are huge. Many foundations right now are looking to increase beyond the average 5% of an average 3-year rolling average of their endowments or whatever the heck their thing is. They're trying to figure out ways, how can they give more with less? And so one of the ways that they're doing that is through program-related investments. So think, if you need capital, and also CBAC is here. They're a great example. They're a CDFI organization. So some foundations are investing in CDFIs, community development financial intermediary, to can make then further the lending into the sector. If you would be approaching a bank or say, I need to build a building for whatever purpose, instead of always asking for a grant, sometimes it really makes much more sense to say, you know what, if you can give me a below market interest rate loan, instead of me having to go to the bank to borrow X percent, at whatever the going rate is, but if you can help us do that, that's a new way of asking for money that it kind of shows that you're also being respectful of the fact that foundations are facing this crisis themselves. Now I'm all over the place. Let me tell you a little bit about Wells Fargo, my cousins. I will share with you their primary focus is, I guess last year they gave about $202 million away nationwide. That's a lot of money. I don't care who you are. $202 million to me, that's a lot of money. That in terms of what their primary focus is community development and education. So those are their sweet spots, but they're looking also at arts and culture, at corporate and private, at other things. In terms of, as they come out in the marketplace, though, they're thinking about products. What other products could they be looking at around neighborhood stabilization? So one of the things that they did this year was they went out and created a priority markets grant, which was focused on neighborhood stabilization. And last year, actually, Parkside Business and Communities in Partnership was one of the recipients in this region. I don't recall how many houses that helped rehab in Camden, but that was a special product. And I think that was like a $75,000 grant or some larger dollar grant that they received. They're also looking at how they can create loans that meet the marketplace needs. So one of the loans that they've looked at creating is in lending against a post-improved housing value versus a pre-approved improved housing value. So again, trying to be creative around their particular marketplace. In terms of types of funders, I heard a question out there about why is it that we are asking for evaluation data before we even, proof before you go out and give. One of the things I think you need to think about is when you're asking a funder, are they a builder or are they a sustainer? If you're asking, if really what you need is to build a program, then you need a business plan. You need to be able to provide some level of evidence why you're going to be worthy of getting a larger dollar grant. So they're not necessarily looking for proof, they're looking for a really compelling story. If the funder is more of a sustainer, you're going to be asking for smaller dollars, right? Because you shouldn't need the same level of dollars. And there you should be able to point to your history and say, every year we're able to train 50 people to do whatever. And I have that proven. But it's a different story that you should be, or a different set of data that you're providing to that funder when you are approaching them. My team has put together a fundraising tips from funders, which I really would ask that you take. I think it's out at the front desk. It really has it's the wisdom of a collective number of funders, not just from corporations, but from private foundations, of the types of things that we see that make a good proposal and types of things that we see that make a really bad proposal. And then even more importantly for you all, on the back, I've put the contacts of the appropriate people from Wachovia and or Wells Fargo for this region. For the general foundation, again, it is not me. For the general corporate foundation, it is Deborah Smith, and she sits out of New York. And for the Wells Fargo Housing Foundation, which again is unique for those that are housing organizations, you can find her data, their data and their programs, which are pretty extensive and compelling for those that it's appropriate for on there. Everything's online applications. That's it. So thank you.
Okay, we're bopping along, which is good. The final presentation comes from the relatively new, I can't say new anymore, executive director of the relatively new, but 5 years in the process of being born, Community Foundation of South Jersey. Sidney Hargrove comes to this region from Columbus, Ohio, so he's, I'm going to guess, a happy guy since the Buckeyes. The Ohio State University is number one now since South Carolina knocked off Alabama. And if you're saying, I don't care, we don't want you to come back to any of our sessions in the future. You have to care about stuff like that. It's critically important. The stuff you do is modestly important. That stuff is like, no. All right. I have wanted to introduce Sydney for a long time because it gives me an opportunity. Doug was talking to you about the proliferation of titles at the C-suite level, which now include CSOs, Chief Sustainability Officers. For the Columbus Foundation, Sydney was the Senior Officer for Strategy and Organizational Learning. That meant he was the Senior Officer for SOL. If you didn't laugh, you don't have kids. It stands for something other than Strategy and Organizational Learning.
That's probably the truth.
Sydney has done a superb job of becoming very rapidly the very articulate face of the Community Foundation of South Jersey. There are 3 roles that he sees the foundation playing. One is as an advisor, one as an investor, and the one that I think is probably the most surprising, but perhaps in the long run the most important, that of being a community leader, not just in the sense of convening discussions around issues, but in a much broader way as well. So the final presentation before we move to your questions for these 3 panelists comes from Sydney Hargrove. Sydney.
Thank you all for being here today and for listening to us. The first thing I have to say is that I never in all my life thought I would share a panel with someone else that was a former engineer and now a funder. I think that's such a unique thing. So it's only in America would that happen. But it's with great pleasure I talked to you just for a few minutes today about this whole idea of the future of funding, and specifically as it relates to the Community Foundation of South Jersey. Peter Drucker once said that the greatest danger in turbulent times is not the turbulence itself, but it is acting with yesterday's logic. And the reality is that as a startup community foundation in South Jersey, when community foundations have been around since 1914 in the United States, but now for the first time in South Jersey, that we realize that much of what we do in being a startup in turbulent times is thinking differently. We can't simply use the same logic before for our funding, for our approach to developing assets, that we've got to be creative and use some unusual suspects to work with us to build what will be, what we hope will be a sustaining influence of funding into the future for South Jersey. So as we do that, we have to be mindful of the trend, the trending, if you will, that we're seeing. For those of you that use Twitter, the trending topics that we see that can potentially affect what we do as we build the organization. Some of them you've actually heard this morning, which is interesting to me because it shows me that we didn't have any conversation over it, but we all are recognizing that these are factors that are major in the field. One is this whole notion of moving from just nonprofits having to collaborate to funders collaborating. I'm absolutely ecstatic over this because one of the things that I recognize probably within 2 or 3 weeks of being here in South Jersey is that the funders in the region want to collaborate. I've never seen such an open door to other foundations in all my life where right off the bat they said, it's time, let's start now talking about what we can do together. And so that's shaping what we do. The other thing is this notion of moving from short-term funding to scaling what works. It's not something that necessarily that we're able to do now, but we're mindful that across the country, general operating under the guise of scaling what works is no longer a bad word. And I think for that, the nonprofit sector should applaud because for so long it did seem like it was a bad word. The next one is this movement from quantitative assessment of grants to quantitative and qualitative. You've heard the word storytelling several times this morning. If you don't think that that is something that is significantly important by now, you should, because in this new media day where being able to tell your story quickly and visually to attract new donors and new people who are in your network, if you will, and talking about your organization is vitally important now, and is going to be even more so important going into the future. So that means new toolkit, new tools in your toolkit. Attending some of this, I think there's a social media session here at the center that's going to happen, really digging deeper, not just saying, let's put up a Facebook page, but what does it mean to build a network of people who care about what I do and who talk about what I do to other funders and others as they're having casual conversation. Funding, also this idea of funding that is focused on a nonprofit's work on an issue to funding that nonprofits in the context of transformative work. I think this is kind of a natural add-on of collaborating funders, because now as we're starting to have conversation, we're saying, we should be able to have a greater impact together than we did individually. So maybe in addition to just making grants, we can also be more proactive to convene and listen to nonprofits and community leaders and others to say, how can we be more transformative in different locations throughout the region, throughout the country? And so this is something else that is impacting, a trend that is impacting the shaping of the foundation. And the final one is the funder toolkit. You've heard this several times also this morning, not only just including grant making, but now also including investments and loans and the other related opportunities. Basically, it's philanthropy, and so is falling under this umbrella of social capital. And what you do is social benefit. And so you're starting to hear that a lot. And there's a reason, because really funders are just trying to find another way to put more money on the ground to have impact. It's not so much that they're moving away from grant making. It is, we are in turbulent times. We have to think differently. What are some of the more creative opportunities that we can take on to try to find ways to have impact in the community? So with that, I say that I'll talk a little bit about the foundation. And that is, with all of these trending factors, there are a number of areas that we have already started to move on. And one is donor and partner being a donor and partner investor aggregator. Now, what that basically means is not only working as an advisor to donor funds, which is our primary role as a community foundation. So donors will set up donor-advised funds, scholarship funds, cause-specific funds based upon the cause that they care about, and we advise them on their philanthropy. But not only do that, but also look at opportunities to broker donor interests in certain causes, regional and national funder interests in those same causes, all with the goal of raising the level of philanthropic investment in South Jersey. So it's like we're setting back and saying, okay, we're here. We have a set of donors that have the same interests. We have regional partners that we're collaborating with, and national partners that we're collaborating with. So how can we use that for the greater benefit of South Jersey? We were able to do that. We will soon, probably within the next week or so, you will be hearing publicly about our first grant-making process. And outside of the fact that we were able to support 13 organizations, what I think is more critical and more important about the grant-making process is, number one, it's new money on the ground in South Jersey that was not here being invested before. Number two, it's the actual resource where the funds came, the actual origination of the funds came from donor funds, regional funding partners, and national foundation partners. So $180,000 or so will be on the ground, but it's all based upon this role of aggregating opportunities and aligning national funder interests, regional funder interests, as well as donor funds to have impact in the community. The next one is to advocate for community-specific and cause-specific endowment funds. Now, we've all heard of endowment funds for our nonprofits. I will say, though, one of the things that I've learned over the last year is that there's a significant percentage of even some of the older nonprofits in the region that don't have endowments and don't have planned giving. And I'll speak more about that in a second, but what community foundations can do, and what really they were created to do in some ways, is to push the whole decision-making process related to endowment philanthropy down to the community level. Our office is in Haddonfield, we can't be successful making decisions from Haddonfield, New Jersey. Because each community, as you know, with all the different municipalities here in South Jersey, they're all different. And so what we've got to do is to continue to use our fund vehicles and to create this opportunity for communities to simply decide what they want to do about the future of their area, and to help them build a permanent endowment to make that impact, to support the nonprofits that they care about. Where this differs from what you would see as United Way is it's not a fundraising model. It's a model of literally building an endowment that will ultimately fund nonprofits into the future, using vehicles like planned giving, using opportunities for people to really basically give to the causes that they care about, but to do it in a more strategic and invested way that will enable them to have more money, and also enable the communities to weather the types of turbulence that we're experiencing right now. One of the leaders that we look to in the community foundation field is the Nebraska Community Foundation, that's how they built the entire organization. They're basically a foundation of many foundations throughout the state of Nebraska. And most of them are rural areas that have found ways to use different, not cash, which is what is typically the medium of fundraising, but property and insurance and other things to fund what these communities care about. And the last one is the role of being a center for philanthropic information in South Jersey. We can't do our jobs if we are not adequately aware of not only trends and issues in the community, but also nonprofits who are addressing those issues. And whether those issues are related to social services or the arts or the environment, we have to be knowledgeable of those things. And so we're working in partnership with one other foundation to look at ways to make that information quickly accessible, so that any donor that wanted to find out about nonprofits and give to nonprofits in South Jersey, that they could do so quite easily and in one place. And so that will help us in many ways to move into this phase of being a center for information on philanthropic opportunity in South Jersey. And with that, I'll just close by saying the only constant in the future of funding and grant making for CFSJ, the Community Foundation of South Jersey, is the constant of constant change. We are a startup. We'll probably do things slightly differently next year than we did last year. So you can't really look at what we did last year and say, well, this is probably what they're going to do next year, because we're learning. We're in learning mode. Every opportunity, every grant we make, we see as an opportunity to learn about an issue, an organization, a community. And so we're structuring it so that we can learn and so that we can evolve organically over time. I did fail to mention one thing that I do want to mention before going to my seat. Going back to this idea of the funder toolkit, including grant making, investments, et cetera, we are partnering with Rutgers to hold a summit, which will probably take place in February now, specifically to look at how nonprofits can take advantage of or move into the space of social entrepreneurship, and also specifically how funders can look at beyond the PRI, but look at ways to collaborate in investing in social entrepreneurship that is not only nonprofit but for-profit and other. And the reason being, there's a significant shortage of entrepreneurs standing in line for some of our communities. The flip side of that is they're not standing in line to come into some of our communities. But people or entrepreneurs that are social benefit focused will have an interest because it's about a triple bottom line. It's not just about making money, it's about having impact. And nonprofits can do that as well, and they have throughout the years. It's not a new concept, and so we just want to simply have a conversation. And so you will hear more about that summit over the next couple of months. Thank you.
Okay, so now we have one of those programmatic dilemmas. We had anticipated, and I take the entire blame for this, at wrapping up at this point, or perhaps even a few minutes before this, but we did not. We have terrific, experienced, knowledgeable people here who would love to respond to your questions to the limit of the availability on their schedules, and I realize that some of you have other places to be, and we have nobody to blame but ourselves for not allowing you to go out the door on a timely basis. So, I'm going to say, of course, if you have to go, you have to go. If you'd like to stay and pose some questions, to the extent that our panelists are able to stay, they will, and they will respond. I would encourage you to follow up with any of them individually if it would be more appropriate. If you have a question the answer to which would be helpful to all the people in the room, you represent 0.7% of the number of 501c3s in South Jersey in the room. It's not a big percentage. That means you're competing with roughly 6,700 organizations for the face time, for the dollars, however they're coming, whether they're coming in traditional or non-traditional ways, which means that I would emphasize to you, not that I have any standing to do it, that storytelling becomes amazingly important. If I don't know who you are and I don't care, it can't possibly matter to me to give you money, however that money might come to you. All right, so if we have questions, let's take them. If you need to go, we realize that you need to go. We have a little bit of housekeeping that we will do at the end for those who are brave enough and don't have somewhere important they have to be. I mean, who would stay? I mean, your day is supposed to be filled up. I'm staying to talk to the woman with the candy. Whatever motivation you have is entirely up to you. If you have questions for Doug or for Lois or for Sydney, yes.
Thank you. This is a question really for Lois and Doug. It's about the large corporation, the national foundation, the regional foundation, an individual local bank branch, for example. So there are generally going to be tiered levels of possible application. My question is, are there links among those, or they're really separate applications and there's no great need to refer to a previous application to this level, at that level, and so on? So educate us a little, please.
I'll speak on the Wells Fargo. The application is an online application, and the foundation is national. So there are national priorities, but representation is local. So Deborah, while she works for the National Foundation, she's the decision maker or is responsible for the decisions in New Jersey. And the decision making actually for Wells Fargo, though, is very local, in that the contributions committee is a contribution committee for South Jersey. If it exceeds a certain dollar amount, it would then need to get a state CEO approval or something of the like. And if it exceeds a really, really, really big number, then it needs to get a national approval. But it is still part of a national program.
Yeah, I think we're fairly similar to that. We have a pretty decentralized model. So if you go into cyber grants and you're in New Jersey and you apply, it'll come to me. Versus coming to the Verizon Foundation, which happens to sit in New Jersey. The Verizon Foundation itself does make some grants. They're the big national grants that you think a big corporate foundation would be making. But the grant making in New Jersey is done pretty much by me and my team, with not too much direct linking on a grant-by-grant basis with the foundation itself, the capital F Foundation, if you will.
The other thing to speak to is sponsorship is different. to recognize, are you asking for a grant or are you asking for sponsorship? Sponsorship is local in decision making.
Over here, Steve, if it matters to you. Mike pooped out? Okay. So just scream.
This message is for Sydney. All the panelists today touched on all the fundraising that all the funding that they've been given. And in knowing that you're a newer organization in South Jersey on a whole, nationwide, but in South Jersey on a whole, a lot of companies, police officers, they're not educated enough with the mental health population. And with the economy going down, the mental health population has been rising. And so that means mental health organization is going to need more funding. When there are cuts in the government, mental health organization get the first cuts. So we, as speaking for one of the mental health agency and for the mental health agency on a whole, we want to know how your organization and all the other organization is going to help the mental health community.
Well, I can say that we have not singled out mental health as a specific issue area. What we've decided really strategically is to try to have a broad area of grant making that will enable us to do anything that stabilizes families. So what you'll see on our website is things related to family stability, the ability of which obviously mental health could potentially be potentially be one of the issue areas. So if you're asking whether or not that could potentially be under that umbrella, yes. But we have not singled out any particular issue really, and we did that specifically because we wanted to have the opportunity to learn before we decided to focus. So we don't want to come in just simply be very pigeonholed into one area. We wanted to be very broad at first to allow us to learn more about the region, and then maybe somewhere down the road, or as donor fund entrants would allow, specify certain issue areas. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
This is a question to anyone on the panel who wants to answer it. Can you speak about funds for operating costs for grantees? Not necessarily in South Jersey, so that might take you, but just generally anyhow. Whether it be for salaries, or I'm working with I'm a consultant to a new organization that's looking to find office space, or expanding, office space, maybe buying a new building, for some, more, seasoned nonprofits, etc. What might be available to help with that? And does that need to be combined with the program dollars as well, or can that be separate?
Sure, I can start, but I'm going to drop a footnote to my previous question. I was answering that on the kind of the forward part of the grant making. On the approval process at a given dollar amount, definitely goes back to the Big F Foundation for approval. So we don't have complete carte blanche on what we do in the state, but on the starting the process we do. So I wanted to clarify that. Operating expenses is an interesting topic. When we look at grants, if we look for a percentage, 10, 15, 20 operating, over that, we get a little queasy. So again, that gets back to our program focus for what we do. It's an interesting tension. We recognize that there's going to be expenses and operating expenses in administering a program. There's no doubt about it. So we had that discussion. And so we're sensitive to the tension, but we tend to look at the outcomes. No bricks and mortar for the Verizon Foundation, no space, salaries per se, to the extent that's not an operating expense. Again, a similar kind of number that we look at. On the domestic violence side, we tend to look a little differently at that. As often, on an intake center for a domestic violence center, that's what you're paying for, right? Is someone to be there for them. So it's a little ad hoc, but that's the general rule of thumb.
Lois?
This goes back to my comments about know your funder. Are you looking at a sustainer or a builder? I believe if you're looking for a sustainer type of funding, I think foundations should be doing general operating grants. I think corporate philanthropy should be doing general operating grants. I think we make you all go through a song and dance of try and make everything programmatic when some of it is just your program is general operating. So I think if you have a really compelling story to tell about what you do as an organization, that's what I would sell. I don't know what the heck Wells Fargo really is looking for from, and I'm sorry, I said that, in terms of their application. But I think if you're a strong organization and you say that, they're going to want to support you if they're a sustainable type of funder. The Wachovia Regional Foundation, I'm a builder, so I am looking for really strong, solid business plans, and I'll help fund those in their neighborhood plans, so I'm even more unique. But just to give, so for them, what we would look more for programmatic results, because I'm building that program, and then I'm going to say, of course, you need to have some general, more flexible dollars within that to help cover other costs. But it's a very different thinking, and as a result of that, because I give very large dollars, I have kind of a right to expect a lot and ask a lot in return. So I think keep those things in mind.
The Community Foundation of South Jersey, for this particular year, the grant making process this year, all of the grants that will be made are actually operating grants for programs. Now, what I mean by that is, through our application process, we did not ask for organizations to ask for a specific thing. We said basically present your outcomes, your results for and the success of your organization. The grant then would go toward that program. Use it how you see fit.
All right. In recognition of the time of day and what I did to squander the available time this morning, I'm going to, I guess, exercise a prerogative and put one question to each of the three of you, which will be our final question. You don't get more than 30 seconds to answer this, and I need a real-world answer. Okay? I'm going to give you the magic wand, to which I believe it was Chris referred, but perhaps it was Doug, I'm not sure. And it is not a blue sky magic wand, so you don't have unlimited funds. You are at the same level that you are now, so this is not like God gives you the ability to do everything and all the resources to back it up. If you could make one change in the world you live in the world that these folks who have come to hear you operate in, knowing they look to you for advice, for money, for lots of things, one real change, specific change, what change would you make? And whoever wants to go first can.
Go ahead, Sydney.
Thank you.
Sydney's going first. We're doing that serpentine thing. We started with Doug and went to Lois and Sydney. So Sydney gets to go first on the...
Clarify your question. One specific change...
that you could dictate. You don't need to achieve consensus to
In the world?
in your world.
In my world.
In your world and the world of the folks who are sitting out here. Okay? Doug, you got an answer? You were nodding.
Oh, I ceded my
Well, I mean,
first
this is, I don't know if this is the major, but this is certainly one that comes to mind from what I've learned over the last year, and that is, when I think of change, I think of from to. I would say from the nonprofit sector being a grant now, funding now sector to one that has the type of long-term endowment that will sustain their work into the future. I mean, that is something that we are totally aware of and trying to figure out ways that we can help nonprofits do.
Okay.
I'm going to go in a very different space, table filling. If I could change one thing next year about my foundation life, I wouldn't have to fill a single table at a gala. And that gets to a little bit about our focus on programs versus dinners. But table filling turns out to be a negative for people like me. And real quickly, I'll tell you why. People like to be home in their jammies. They really do. They love you. They do. But they want to be home in their jammies. They don't tell you if they're going to sit at your table until 24 hours before. So I'm making phone calls for a black tie in Newark, New Jersey, 18 hours before the event, trying to convince people that they're not on my D list. Okay? Table filling is a real problem for foundation people. So if I had that wand, I'd say no more table filling. I'll say for $10,000, give me 2 tables. For $20,000, give me 1. So.
And you know what's worse than being on the D list and getting the call 18 hours in advance? It's being on the list I'm on, which is the E or F list. You don't even get called. There's a space at the table.
Don't say that.
I'm looking for like a free dinner.
You're
know,
gonna get called now.
I came for the pastry this morning. Lois, you get the chance to put the cap on the whole day, or the whole half day.
I would say for us all to really focus on mission and not on self. And that's hard in terms of as a nonprofit. Maybe your mission is really not on mission anymore. Maybe as a foundation, it's more about it's not about the foundation's glory and power, but it's about the mission of the people. And if we all really, in politics, I'm not even going to go there. So really focusing on what is our mission as society and how can we work together to get there.
Toward that end, I will leave you on a couple of housekeeping notes, but one comment. When Chris was talking this morning about TCNJ had the thing about sustainability, but then they did something else and they called it something at Rutgers. And then later,
I was shocked.
He came back and said, and so the guys at Rutgers melted into the guys at TCNJ, and which was the obvious thing to do, as opposed to, well, I got one, and so you want to have one, because if I have one, it must be important to have one, and so we need our own, and of course we need to staff it and so on. I thought that was actually pretty cool.
And to give kudos here, I think locally you have demonstrated, through your alliance that you're creating a center for nonprofits, and Rowan's, your acronym that I can't ever remember.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either, but
I think is applaudable.
Well, we do too. So if you want to applaud us for that, that's okay. All right. Here are the housekeeping details of the moment. We send you on your way with wishes for no traffic hassles and a safe trip to wherever you're going next in your day. First thing, remember that there is a Facebook event on October 20th. There's a LinkedIn event on December 15th that we are helping to co-sponsor. So if you're interested in those specifics of social media, we would welcome you back. Remember that Doug and I invite you to the Forum on the Future of New Jersey on November 9th at New Jersey City University, where we'll be talking about innovation and change and the kinds of things that are on that little poll that I asked you to fill out. So just leave that. I will come around and collect it if you filled it out. Thank you very much. And finally, I want to go back and thank the people who were hosting us today, literally who gave up their room, EIRC, the folks at Rowan, who were nice enough to do all of the stuff to put this together. Certainly, Steve Lebetkin from Professional Podcasting. And finally, the members of the board of the Unpronounceable Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey. Bob Dentino, our president. If you have social entrepreneurship ideas, talk to him. Okay? Sarah Piddington, Pat Bruder, who is from EIRC, Wanda Hardy from Creditworthy. All of those folks are working hard. They're all volunteers to create programs like this. We think it was great for us to be able to have Chris and Doug and Lois and Sydney. A round of applause for them, and go do good stuff.
For more information about the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, visit www.npdcsnj.org. We produce this program in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. For everyone at the Nonprofit Development Center of Southern New Jersey, this is Steve Lebetkin. Thank you for joining us, and take good care.